Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Lucy Resar, and I am a program coordinator at Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. And thank you so much to Sharon and the Quarryville Library for hosting us tonight. In a few moments, I'll send a pre-presentation questionnaire in the chat. If anyone is able to fill this out, that would be extremely helpful. It helps ensure that we have funding to continue putting on free programming just like this. And you'll also be entered to win a $25 Starbucks gift card. And now, for those of you who don't know, I'll provide a brief introduction to PMC. Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is a nonpartisan nonprofit that envisions a Pennsylvania judicial system in which everyone is assured impartiality, fairness, accessibility, and respect. For over 35 years, PMC has worked to educate all Pennsylvanians about our courts and how to navigate them with confidence. PMC aims to provide resources to make that possible for all residents of the Commonwealth. And while we will not be providing legal advice tonight, we hope that this presentation will be an informative and educational experience for everyone here. And we are so honored to have Anthony J.G. Hassey. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Amazing, joining us tonight, and I'm gonna hand it over to him to do a quick intro.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Hassey. I am a lawyer in Pittsburgh. I started my career out as a public defender in Allegheny County, where I practiced for a few years. After that, I worked in the insurance defense sector and currently do corporate commercial litigation and intellectual property prosecution and all sorts of stuff. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Amazing. This is the QR code. I'll also put it in the chat. And this is also sponsored by Comcast. And this is just slides on PMC. We have a bunch of programming coming up as well. A lot of it's hybrid, so people are welcome to join. And more information is available on our website. And now, Anthony, do you want to take it away?
Certainly. So tonight we've got a couple of topics for conversation. We're going to start with the structure of the courts in Pennsylvania. We'll talk a little bit about the citizen responsibilities in our judicial system and the election of judges across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And after we get into some of those, we could also do a question and answer for any questions that anybody might have for topics that we might have glanced over, or anything that you would want a little bit more information on. So as you can see here, Pennsylvania has a long history of the court system relative to that of the federal judiciary. Pennsylvania Supreme Court was actually created about 57 years before the before the creation of the United States Supreme Court. It was established in Lancaster County in May of 1729. And its origins were, that of humble beginnings. A lot of early cases and matters were heard in a local tavern. And it wasn't until later that there was a court building that was erected and matters were held. As you can see, the original courthouse that was built was destroyed by a fire, and a new one was built, and it was used until 1853. That's a similar story for a lot of courthouses throughout Pennsylvania. As stated, Pennsylvania Supreme Court was created in 1722, back before the nation was founded. And most of the law all of the law that was used at that time was English common law. So that's kind of the legal framework that set off, the legal system that we know today. So what type of courts are there? What do we see? You've got criminal cases and civil cases. In Pennsylvania, they are heard at state court at the Commonwealth court level. Both sitting judges at that level hear both civil suits and criminal cases. The certain counties have criminal divisions and civil divisions where judges will hear exclusively criminal cases or exclusively civil cases, but other counties judges will hear both. Now, what's a civil suit? The civil suit is a matter between two litigants, two or more litigants, the plaintiff or the party who has been injured, and the defendant, the party who is alleged to have caused the injury. A civil suit is initiated with a complaint, and it alleges facts that a defendant has done to bring about the injury. Most of the civil litigation deals with injuries and, how a wronged party can be made whole. There's a certain standard, a legal standard in the civil suit, which is by a preponderance of the evidence. What that means is it's the plaintiff's job, in order to be successful in that civil suit, to prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence. And all that means is it more likely than not that the injury that was alleged occurred? It's a 50.01 standard. A lot of lawyers at trial will show an example of, we don't have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. Just picture the scales of justice. And if the facts and evidence tilt ever so slightly in plaintiff's favor, they've proven their case. So that's a good visual representation of what the standard is in a civil matter. There is no constitutional right to an attorney in civil court, unless there's a guardianship or there's a civil matter pending in which the state is looking to take away children or something like that. But aside from that, you have no right to an attorney in a civil suit. In a criminal case, it's an action between the Commonwealth itself and an individual citizen who has been alleged to have committed a crime. Criminal cases deal exclusively with whether or not the law has been broken. The standard in a criminal suit is the highest standard of proof that a moving party needs in order to establish their case. You have no burden as a defendant to prove anything in a criminal case, except for some minor exceptions. For example, if you choose to prove an affirmative defense or something like that. But short of that, it's the prosecution's job to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that's not a mathematical certainty, but standard that is set forth basically it's high. An analogy that criminal trial lawyers like to use is it's a reasonable doubt that would give you pause in a matter of importance in your day-to-day life. And I know a lot of prosecutors will say, think of like yourself, you're getting ready to go on a trip, you've got the car packed, you take off, you start going to the airport, and you think to yourself, did I leave my garage door open? If you pause in that moment, pause enough to think to go back to have to check to see if you opened or closed your garage door, that's reasonable doubt. That's what they've proven, or that's the standard to which that they need to prove their case when the government is attempting to take the liberty away from a citizen. In criminal matters, you are guaranteed the right to an attorney. We hear it all the time in modern television and movies. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, you'll be appointed a public defender. That public defender has the same training, the same skill and knowledge as a private attorney, but they're provided by the Commonwealth. Except a fun fact, in Pennsylvania, it's one of the only states that doesn't state fund its public defender's offices. They're funded by the counties individually. But that attorney will do everything that a paid attorney will do, often with the same or greater skill than some private attorneys. So This pyramid represents the structure of the courts in Pennsylvania. At the lowest level, you have the magisterial district courts in all of the counties except for Philadelphia, which has the municipal court. From there, you have courts of common pleas, the Superior Court, and the Commonwealth Court, and then at the top, the Supreme Court. Each of these courts are granted specific jurisdiction, which means that they have the right to hear certain cases and matters. Does our next slide break these down individually? Yes. Okay. So you guys are in Lancaster County. That is the 2nd Judicial District. We've got some links here that can, I believe that they direct you to where the courthouse is, and some more information about the magisterial district judges in Lancaster County. Here's the Lancaster County magisterial district map. Oh, we could go back to that for a second. This breaks down the different regions. It looks like we've got 1, 2, 8 or 9 different magisterial districts. That indicates the number of different magistrates throughout the county. Each one of them is responsible for a different area and location that you see on this map, but all of the magistrates in the county, when they have their cases heard, they would get appealed to the Court of Common Pleas for the County of Lancaster. So as I said earlier, each of the courts that you saw on the pyramid have different jurisdiction granted under the Constitution. Magisterial district courts have limited jurisdiction. Regarding civil matters, they only can hear cases that deal with less than $12,000. So that could be, some minor car accidents, personal injury, landlord-tenant disputes, stuff like that. In the criminal arena, magisterial district judges have the authority to, issue warrants, hold preliminary hearings, fix and accept bail, and try and resolve lower level, lower dollar figure cases. Now, I want to talk about a preliminary hearing for a second. In Pennsylvania, it's the initial opportunity that a defendant has to learn about the charges that are brought against them. And in that arena, a hearing is held. Prosecution puts on evidence to show the magistrate that there's enough to continue proceeding with criminal charges against them. And a defendant has a right to a hearing and to be heard at that stage. Magistrates also deal with, traffic offenses, disorderly conducts, public drunkenness, things like that. And as indicated on the screen, this is not a court of record. If you want, you can have a hearing transcribed by a court reporter, but there's not an automatic right to that. Again, the magistrate is the king of their domain, so to say. There's no jury trials. All the decisions made at that level are made by a magistrate. So, Lancaster County Court of Common Pleas. What happens at this stage? They have the authority to hear appeals from the minor courts de novo, and appeals not exclusively assigned to another court like the Commonwealth Court or the Superior Court. This court is kind of the first step in dealing with matters involving children and families. You have orphans court which deal in like estates and other matters of the sort. At this stage, you do have the right to a jury, both criminally and civilly. And as indicated on the screen, this is where civil matters go if they have an initial $12,000 threshold or more. A little background on the inner workings of the court. You've got a clerk of court's office and a prothonotari's office. These both serve very, very important functions to keeping the court systems running smoothly and effectively and efficiently. Your clerk of courts does everything from, keeping track of criminal records and dealing with warrants, name changes, summary appeals, traffic appeals, and criminal background searches, issuing warrants, and the like. And that's located on the second floor of the courthouse there. The prothonotary is responsible for recording all of the filings in civil matters. As you can see, there's a long list of things that they take care of. Passport applications, administering oaths, appeals, name changes. They keep track of all the civil actions that are going on. They, post orders and rulings, can be responsible for keeping track of custody orders, divorce matters, and judgments that are offered, or judgments that are levied against defendants in cases. They additionally do deal with property rights, recording deeds, mortgage foreclosures, mental commitments, all sorts of school law, school audit and reports, and records of land transactions. So that's what your prothonotary will do. Clerk of courts, as we talked about, they prepare and maintain the records for the criminal division in the Court of Common Pleas. They'll sign and affix the seal of the courts to writs, oaths, affirmations, and they assume custody of the seal. And that seal is the thing that grants authority for all sorts of things. It gives the backing of the government effectively. They certify and distribute court orders. Again, a court order is something that arises after a hearing or a trial where the parties have a dispute. They go to the court resolves it, and the way that court resolves the dispute is in the form of a court order that then goes down to the clerk's office. They certify it, and then it becomes a binding decision. Clerk also certifies and prepares bills of costs for the defendant, because there are court costs assigned or involved when you're involved in both the criminal system, and court costs involved when you're filing civil matters. And they use the computerized financial management to disperse fees, fines, costs, and any restitution that might arise in a case. It looks like there's a self-help center on the first floor. You can go and ask for assistance there. All of these the prices after this isn't the cost of asking for help, but it's the fee associated with the action that you're looking to do.
Also, I just want to say this will be sent out to everyone, so all the links will be clickable when I send it out later.
Terrific. See the Consumer Credit Card Division program. It looks like your county has a program where you can go if you are being sought by a creditor. The goal of the program is to help Lancaster County residents through the use of free credit counselors and court supervised conciliation conferences to resolve credit card collection lawsuits. So the conciliation is a process where the parties meet. The court can supervise it, and they come up with some sort of arrangement that will allow the parties involved to amicably resolve any issue. So if if you fall behind and you've got debt, there's a program that will allow you to attempt to refinance the debt or work with the creditor to avoid falling behind, and will assist in catching up with and dealing with any debt that you might have. The program is available to all Lancaster County residents who have a credit card collection action filed against them after January 1st of 2022 or prior to December 31st, 2021, where a judgment has not been entered and they applied for entry to a program. So as we talked about earlier, a judgment can get entered if you don't respond to a pleading or if you lose in court. So there are certain requirements to getting into the program, but if you meet them, it would be a great resource to utilize. So there's also accommodations for non-English speakers and people who are differently abled. If you've got hearing impairment or visual impairment, there are also accommodations that can be made through the court that provide access to the court services, facilities, and anything that you would need to use through the judicial, any judicial proceeding. So there's also a residential mortgage foreclosure diversion program, similar to the credit card or the credit and debt program. This is a program that can be utilized by citizens who, have fallen behind on their mortgages, and helps them, stay in their homes. Again, there are certain requirements that are met, that are needed to be met in order to enter the program. And as you can see, they're listed down below. But effectively, again, if you fall behind on your mortgage or something like that, this is a good program to get involved with. We have this here in Allegheny County, and it has helped countless citizens maintain their primary homeowner or place of residence. Interpreters. So if you find yourself involved in a court proceeding, it's important that you understand the proceedings as they're lodged against you. In judicial proceedings, the court pays for interpreters for all of the parties, victims, witnesses, parents, guardians, or anybody in loco parentis to a minor. The guardian, the parent, anyone in loco parentis to an incapacitated party, victim, or witness. So the court will make sure, if there's a hearing, that everybody who is involved in the hearing has the capability of understanding what's going on. It's part of, what makes the judicial system fair, is people understand the things that are going on in front of them. Typically, the court staff will coordinate with counsel or the individual before any proceeding to ensure that all of the needs of the individual are met. And that way, proceeding can run as smoothly as possible. Legal assistance in Lancaster County. So in Lancaster County, y'all are lucky enough to have the Mid-Penn organization. It's a nonprofit law firm that provides free legal help to people who qualify on their base level of income. They deal with it, issues including domestic violence, welfare, consumer issues, elder law, housing, social security, disability, education issues, custody, divorce proceedings, and pretty much anything under the sun from the civil side of things. As we discussed earlier, the public defender's office is the counterpart to Mid-Penn on the criminal side. But this is an organization that helps all the citizens of Lancaster County that qualify if they find themselves in need of an attorney on the civil side of things. So we have moved out of the trial court level. We've moved into the intermediate appellate courts. Recall the pyramid earlier. We've got two levels of intermediate appellate courts: the Superior Court of Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth Court. Now, the Superior Court hears appeals from civil and criminal matters from the Court of Common Pleas, in addition to family matters and the like. So if you go through the way that this court gets jurisdiction, so you go through, typically there's a trial, the trial has ended, and the parties to the trial have decided that something at the Court of Common Pleas wasn't right. So they'll petition the Superior Court to hear the matter. And the only way that a case gets before the Superior Court is if jurisdiction has been exhausted at the Court of Common Pleas level. The Commonwealth Court, on the other hand, while it is an intermediate appellate court, has different jurisdiction than the Superior Court. They hear cases that are brought against the Commonwealth and appeals and decisions made by state agencies. And sometimes they get appeals from the Court of Common Pleas if they involve state agencies. So that could be like Department of Education, Department of, like all of your state agencies, PennDOT, the like, those end up in the Commonwealth Court. Here we have the sitting members of the Commonwealth Court. It was founded in 1968. As we've talked about, it is one of two intermediate appellate courts. This is a unique system to Pennsylvania. All of the 50 states are able to organize their courts however they want under their state constitutions. Pennsylvania felt that the Commonwealth Court would be a good opportunity to have, cases against the state of Pennsylvania and state agencies heard in this avenue. The term for the sitting judges on the Commonwealth Court is 10 years. As you can see, there are 9 judges on the Commonwealth Court, and the method of getting onto the Commonwealth Court is through a partisan election. Additionally, the Commonwealth Court heard the case that dealt with the undated mail-in ballots during the 2022 election. So that's just an example of some of the matters over which the Commonwealth Court has jurisdiction. Here we've got the members of the Superior Court, founded in 1895. It's the second of the two intermediate appellate courts in Pennsylvania. They hear criminal and civil cases, as well as appeals from family divisions and family litigation. Similar to the Commonwealth Court, they've got a 10-year term. They are also elected via partisan election. All judges in Pennsylvania are elected. There are no appointments like the federal system. So that's just a distinction between our state system and the federal system itself. Commonwealth versus Ruffin was a criminal case that dealt with illegal search and seizure. The court ruled that partial obstruction of a vehicle registration plate or a license plate is enough for the police to pull over a vehicle. So in that case, based on how criminal cases go, the police officer used the partial obstruction of a license plate to stop a vehicle. After the stop ensued, a search of the vehicle ensued, and some illicit material was found, whether it was a firearm or drugs or something like that. The police were able to use, the Superior Court ruled that the police were able to use that registration plate obstruction as justification for the state to get into this individual's car. On the civil side of things, in Coleman versus Grain Healthcare, the Superior Court ruled in 2022 that a nursing home's agreement, arbitration agreement, was unconscionable. They basically found that, forcing arbitration, which could have its benefits to the nursing home, was unconscionable. It was an illegal contract, which was overruled, and it gave plaintiffs in this case the opportunity to have their matter heard in a way other than arbitration. So at the top of the pyramid, you've got the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They have ultimate authority on matters brought before all of the lower courts. Unlike with the Superior Court, where in criminal cases you have an automatic right of appeal, there is no automatic right of appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The review of cases is discretionary. and it is only mandatory in a limited number of cases dealing with interpretation of the Pennsylvania Constitution or cases involving the death penalty. Now, the other extreme grant of authority that the Superior Court has is the King's Bench power, or the power of extraordinary jurisdiction. And I believe we talk about on that a little bit on the next slide. Oh, nope, we're okay. So the Supreme Court, like as we discussed, it is the final say on matters that have been appealed through the court system in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's the oldest court in the United States. It was founded in 1722. There are 7 justices on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Just like the other courts, it's a 10-year term, and the method for getting elected to the Supreme Court is via partisan election. In 2022, they upheld the constitutionality of mail-in voting, reversing the Commonwealth Court's decision. In doing so, kind of flexing their Supreme Court muscles and saying, you know, we disagree with how the Commonwealth Court ruled. This is how the law should be interpreted. And because there's the Supreme Court, they have the final say. And ultimately that becomes the law and how it's interpreted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Commonwealth versus Barr was a particularly interesting development in criminal law, heard in 2021. This was right around the time that marijuana started becoming decriminalized in Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court in that case ruled that the smell of marijuana alone is not sufficient probable cause to permit this a search by officers. So that's a case that's going to be cited more and more frequently as more and more people, exercise their right to smoke marijuana and possess it. And this case is a protection against a government operative stopping you on the street, pulling you over, just based on the smell of marijuana alone. And that, again, that's a ruling came down from the Supreme Court. That's the new law of the land in terms of search and seizure. Aside from hearing cases, as the final authority there, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has other additional roles and functions. As you can see, the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts educates judges, and they do the budgeting for the court system and make sure that everything's running in ship shape. They are also, they have the Judicial Conduct Board, which oversees judges and how they act, and ensuring that they are acting with fairness, impartiality, and are maintaining a judicial demeanor. They also conduct special committees of the Supreme Court, and they are ultimately the ones who regulate the practice of law. So they'll do attorney admissions, they will do disciplinary hearings for lawyers who have run afoul of the bar, and they have the final say when it comes to whether or not a lawyer can be disbarred or have their license suspended or impacted in any way. So we talked about the Pennsylvania courts. We've got the federal court system. Everything funnels its way from the bottom up. Federal courts deal with federal law. State courts deal with state law. There are 2 types of ways to get into federal court. The first is, as I said, cases that involve federal law. Challenges to the constitutionality of statutes or matters that arise from the Constitution itself. They grant the court jurisdiction there. On top of or beyond that, the other method that the federal courts gain jurisdiction over a case is in cases or controversies where the amount at issue is more than $75,000. And you have what's called diversity of citizenship. And what that means is all of the plaintiffs and all of the defendants are from different states. beyond that, that's how you end up getting into the U.S. District Court levels. There's also U.S. Bankruptcy Court. They hear obviously bankruptcy matters, and are the base of that fills out the base of our pyramid in the federal courts. For an appeal to be heard from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to the United States Supreme Court, the way that happens, the way that case gets to the Supreme Court is if there's an issue of federal law involved. An example of that would be where a Pennsylvania statute or law interferes with a right granted under the Constitution. A lot of times it can be, like we discussed earlier, criminal search and seizure issues, rights are guaranteed under the First Amendment, Second Amendment cases, and the like. So that's how a case would make its way from Pennsylvania state court into the federal system, and to have the possibility of being heard by the Supreme Court of the United States. Here is our federal district map. Pennsylvania is broken up into 3 districts: the Eastern District, the Middle District, and the Western District. Think of these like the courts of common pleas throughout the state itself. They all have the same authority. They all have similar jurisdiction, but they're spread out so that we don't have, an overwhelmed trial court level. Cases that are heard in Pennsylvania's 3 district courts on appeal are appealed to the Third Circuit. The other members of the Third Circuit are New Jersey, Delaware, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And, I've had cases in both the Western District and the Third Circuit, but I haven't been able to get down to the U.S. Virgin Islands yet. Given the opportunity, I think that it would be pretty fun to go travel there and get to do something. But I've yet to find jurisdiction for any of my cases in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But it's a big district, so you get a variety of cases there. Federal judges, unlike state judges, are appointed. United States district courts, the circuit courts, and nominations to the Supreme Court are made by the president, and they're made for life. The process is very different than that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There are nominating committees who make suggestions to the senators of the states. The senators then, in turn, make suggestions to the president. And once a suggestion is made, there's a full background check done on the candidate to see if they're suitable. The FBI and the Justice Department get involved. And then after all of that takes place, a Senate Judiciary confirmation hearing is placed. It is a merit selection. And with federal judges, there's no age limit, but they can opt to take senior status at any point. This differs from judges in Pennsylvania, where there is an age limit. A few years back, there was a ballot initiative that capped the age that a judge can serve on the Pennsylvania court at 75. It was raised from the age of 70. The ballot initiative passed, and now in Pennsylvania, judges can serve up until they turn 75. So we've gone through the structure of the courts. We've gone through, how they're set up, what they hear, what kind of authority do they have. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time about anything that we've covered so far?
I do. When you were going over the credit card relief and the mortgage relief agencies,
Yes.
do they have anything similar with medical debt?
No, not to my knowledge. Although, I can't speak for how things are done in Lancaster County. It might be worth calling the resources that are available to hear about whether or not they help. I mean, I've worked in the public interest sector. I've worked as a public defender for some years, and it's been my experience that people who are involved in those arenas of practice are often willing to help as much as they can. So, if there is some sort of medical debt, the word, call, see what there is to see.
Thank you.
Anything else? No?
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Anthony. And just as a reminder, everyone, I will send out the slides. So you'll have all the links and all that information will be available to you. And thank you
We're gonna
so
do
much.
this, and we're gonna do this again in, I think, January or February. I have to remember the dates, but we're gonna be doing one on landlord and tenant relationships. And then we're gonna do another one on expunging your criminal record. So for people that have done something foolish, how do you get them to get a cleaner record?
Well, yeah, and that's such an important one. I would definitely recommend attending that, just to see what kind of rights and programs there are that can help with people who have been convicted of crimes, because a conviction can really have a huge impact on, every aspect of life: housing, loans, jobs, work, all of that. So definitely attend that one. It'll be a good one.
Well, thank you all so much again. I hope you all have a great evening. And I'll be in touch with all the resources from tonight. Thanks, Sharon, too.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.